starring Leslie Nielsen, a cop who's always on the alert. Mikhail Gorbachev. I knew it. Queen Elizabeth, everyone's favorite queen. Priscilla Presley, a woman who really cooks.
How hot and wet do you like it?
Ricardo Montalban.
Frank.
You're both right. George Kennedy, the partner with an appetite for danger. O.J. Simpson, as you've never seen him before. And Reggie Jackson in his first dramatic role. In a movie so big, it had to be filmed in color. The Naked Gun, from the files of Police Squad. Coming. If you only see one movie this year, you ought to get out more often. The Naked Gun 2.5. The Smell of Fear. And introducing Anna Nicole Smith as Tanya.
Have you seen my pigeon?
Naked Gun 33 1/3. The final insult. Rest assured, I won't stop until I've found justice.
What do you want, little one?
Your ass. Nobody messes with Police Squad.
Welcome back to the Nerdy Grail, and I'm officially back from my holiday now, and I've got a plethora of content coming on the channel over the next couple of weeks. From unboxings to movie reviews to even getting back out there and doing some Comic-Con vlogs. Yes, I've got a few Comic-Cons coming up, so stay tuned for vlogs from those events. But today I am doing another movie review stroke franchise discussion. I wasn't sure if I was just going to do a movie review, but because I've watched all these movies quite recently and the latest movie came out literally yesterday, I thought why not bundle it together and do a bit of both, a movie review and a franchise discussion. As you can see, I've got a couple of movies in the background, Airplane, Top Secret, but the one I'm talking about the most, and if you've seen the thumbnail and the opening clips, you know I'm obviously focusing on the Naked Gun franchise, because yesterday, the fourth movie titled The Naked Gun, or The Naked Gun 2025, just so we can distinguish it from the first one a bit more, came out in cinemas, and I went with my fiance after coming back from holiday to go and watch it. Oh boy, what a franchise the Naked Gun franchise actually is. It's a really, really unique one, an interesting one. But how am I going to do this discussion? Well, rather than go over each movie individually, which I will still do, I'm going to break it down into two sections. So the first section of this video will be me talking about the original trilogy. So the Naked Gun 1, the Naked Gun 2.5, and the Naked Gun 33 1/3. And then the second half of the video, I will be focusing then on the latest one and doing my movie review on the Naked Gun 2025, starring Liam Neeson. So let's waste no more time and jump straight into a bit of background research and the original trilogy for the Naked Gun. So like any franchise discussion, I've got to start by going over the background information with what led into the franchise. Now, I knew nothing about the Naked Gun franchise. My friends knew stuff about it and watched it and would recommend it to me, but it just didn't seem like my type of thing. However, my fiance's dad recommended that we should watch Top Secret, which I know was done roughly by the same person, so the style of comedy would be similar. So we watched Top Secret, adored it. We watched films like Airplane and Airplane 2, adored those as well. And we know that Naked Gun was within the same boundary, the same comedy, the same type of writing. And so we thought, yeah, we're going to watch the Naked Gun. We watched the first Naked Gun, adored it, and so we then had to go and watch the rest of the movies, especially with the latest film that's just been released coming out. We thought we need a bit of background information, perhaps. Especially since in the trailer they showed a picture of Leslie Nielsen's character showing that they are sort of doing a bit of a continuation of the franchise. So the first film was released in 1988 and has a runtime of roughly 85 minutes, which all these movies have a runtime of between 80 and 85 minutes roughly. So they're fairly fast-paced, to be honest, and that's definitely apparent in the style of comedy that they use as well in the film. And I like to call the comedy in this franchise a bit Marmite. I feel like you're either going to love it or you're going to hate it, because it's a particular style of comedy that can be a bit overstimulating for some people. So it's like very slapstick style, and they use a lot of visual puns and visual gags. There's always something going on. You can't just focus on your core character who they're zooming in on at the time. You need to also look at what's going on behind you, because there's a lot of stuff that could be happening. Like a lot of crazy comedy. You could have people flying everywhere, random people walking in, just anything and anything can happen. Anything you can picture that could happen in a comedy, it will probably happen in the background as well as with our main cast. But they all do a fantastic job. I personally like it, but I know some people might not like that style of comedy. But also, this is based on a TV series that was very short-lived from 1982 titled Police Squad. And it was based on the character that Neeson plays, Frank Drebin, as well. But it was very short-lived, but it did lead into the franchise that we got here today. So that's quite interesting. I thought I had to do a bit of research on that. Our core characters for this, obviously we've got Leslie Nielsen, who's our core protagonist for the first 3 films, who plays Frank Drebin, basically a bumbling, clueless police officer who's always gets stumbled into these weird crimes and manages to save the day in the most bizarre ways possible, and I mean bizarre ways possible. You've then got Priscilla Presley, who's his love interest, Jane Spencer, who they have like an on-off relationship throughout the films as well. You've then got Ricardo Montalban, who plays Vincent Ludwig, who's the main antagonist for the first film. Obviously, the antagonists do change film to film. We've then also got George Kennedy, who plays Captain Ed Hocken, who's also in the 3 films as well. And then the character of Norberg, played by O.J. Simpson. I'm not going to go into too much detail on him, but he is one of the core characters as well. I do like the character of Norberg. He is an interesting character. I will admit that. But the overall plot of the first movie is basically Frank is, after his partner Norberg gets shot, he tries to find the culprit, which leads him to finding business tycoon Richard Vincent Ludwig and his assistant Jane Spencer. And Vincent Ludwig is planning on using mind control in order to turn people into would-be assassins. And so Frank has to try and stop them. And obviously, like I said, bizarre comedy ensues. And it is just a wild ride from start to finish. There's so much that goes on, especially in the final confrontation on a baseball field where the Queen Elizabeth, has been invited and they're planning on assassinating her. And lots of wild stuff ensues. It is absolutely crazy. But it is a fun movie. It is a very fun movie in my personal opinion. But the comedy doesn't just stop with what goes on the screen. It also goes into the posters and goes into all sorts. Like, you can probably just about make out there, but on the posters for like Naked Gun, he will be flying on a gun, he'll be holding like a banana, he'll be doing lots of weird stuff. And even the titles of the film are weird as well. Like the first one was The Naked Gun from the Files of Police Squad, but this second film now, which came out 3 years later in 1991, titled The Naked Gun 2.5, yeah, they even started to make the titles a bit bizarre like that, is called The Smell of Fear. And again, directed by David Zucker, has a runtime of 85 minutes, so again, similar length. And most of the core cast return again for this one. So you've still got Leslie Nielsen's Frank Drebin, still got George Kennedy's Captain Ed Hocken, still got Priscilla Presley as Jane Spencer, but obviously a couple of more additional characters do come into play, like they change your core villain and stuff like that. So what's this film about? Well, this powerful energy corporation is intent on interfering with eco-friendly plans of this new character entitled Dr. Albert S. Meinheimer, who's like trying to do this like renewable energy to help the planet, basically. But they plan on replacing him with an imposter who will do their bidding so that they can interfere with the plans and basically, world domination, basically. Your typical comedy, crime comedy. But also at the same time, Frank gets involved in their plans while trying to win back the heart of Jane, Priscilla Presley's character from the first movie. This movie I also did enjoy. I thought it was pretty good. I do like the character of Albert S. Meinheimer. He's a pretty fun character. Again, lots of crazy hijinks ensues. The pacing is still pretty good in this. Again, there's so much that goes on in this film. It's definitely worth checking out the second one as well, if I'm perfectly honest. And the new characters do make it, and the old characters are just as funny as they were in the first movie as well. But also then you've got then a couple of years later, so another 3 years later, so there was a bit of a consistent time gap between the films. You then got The Naked Gun 33 and a third. So rather than 3 and a third, they decided to go 33 and a third. And this one's called The Final Insult. But this was directed by Peter Segal, so a different director. But David Zucker and all still had, was still like writers and stuff on here. But this was a new director under the helm. And you can sort of tell to a degree. Like the comedy is still the same, but there's something did feel different. And if I'm honest, 33 and a third is probably my least favourite of the whole franchise, if I'm being perfectly honest. It's also the shortest of the franchise, at only 82 minutes long. So 3 minutes shorter than all the rest in the franchise. But yeah, it was released in 1994. And basically the plot of this one is Frank Drebin's now retired, but he gets pulled out of retirement in order to help Norberg and the captain to solve a potential terrorist attack on the Academy Awards, which, yeah, when you read that, it is bizarre. And in this film, you've got like Frank pretending to be, infiltrate the bad guy's lair and pretend to be on this side, and it's really, really, really odd. I struggle a bit with this one. I think the pacing is definitely off in this one, and the final confrontation does drag an awful lot, if I'm perfectly honest. It's not my favourite. Would I say to miss out on it? No, because it does, in my mind, set up the future of the franchise, the next film, because at the end, Frank and Jane have a baby who, if you've watched the new one or seen the trailers for the new one, you know Liam Neeson's character is the son of Frank Drebin. So it kind of does almost like set up the next one. I don't know whether it's intentionally or unintentionally, but it does. So it is worth checking out. And look, it is still funny. It's just not as funny as the first two, if I'm honest. But the main thing that I wanted to talk about, obviously, in this video is the brand new film, The Naked Gun. So now I've gone over briefly the original trilogy, and I would recommend going and watching the original trilogy. It is a lot of fun. And I'd also recommend going out to check out some of these other films as well, like Top Secret and Airplane. But now that I've gone over briefly the original trilogy, let's now shift over to 2025, and I'll give you my movie review on the brand new Naked Gun movie. Right, so now I've gone over the original trilogy, let's move on and talk about the latest one, simply titled The Naked Gun. And so to distinguish it from the other one, obviously it doesn't have the extra subheading, but you could also just call it The Naked Gun 2025. Whereas this one, obviously, we've had a massive gap between the films now. Like I said, the third film was in 1994, and now obviously it's 2025, so there's been a huge gap in the movies now. This one was obviously not directed by David Zucker. This one was directed by Akiva Schaffer, but it was based on Police Squad and the other Naked Gun films under David Zucker. However, this was produced by two people. This was produced by Erica Huggins and Seth MacFarlane. And you probably know Seth MacFarlane, his style of comedy. You've got films like A Million Ways to Die in the West. You've obviously got stuff like American Dad and Family Guy. So when you think about that and try to implement that style of comedy into it as well, it's definitely sort of leans slightly more towards that style of comedy, because obviously times have changed now since the 90s and 80s. So they couldn't do exactly the same thing that they did in the first three movies, but they definitely pay homage to it, and there's definitely enough of the original trilogy style of comedy in it to make it feel like it is still part of that universe and is still part of that canon. And that is apparent. They do that. But obviously it is done in a slightly different, more modernized way, because obviously, like over 20 years has passed now since that movie, so they need to change and go on. But yeah, this was produced by Seth MacFarlane and Erica Huggins, was still distributed by Paramount. All these films go under Paramount, and this has a runtime of 85 minutes, so an hour and 25 minutes, keeping to the original's sort of length. They really try to mimic that to a degree, and they do lots of things like the original trilogy does as well. But this was released on August 1st, 2025. And your cast is, you've got pretty much it's a big cast, but they obviously don't focus on a lot of the other characters, so it's also quite small at the same time. So the main ones to really focus on is obviously Liam Neeson's character, who is Frank Drebin Jr., so the son of Leslie Nielsen's character. You've got Pamela Anderson as Beth, so his love interest for the film. You've got Paul Waterhauser, who plays Captain Ed Hocker Jr., the son of the police captain from the first 3 films. And you've also got your main core villain, Danny Huston, who plays Richard Kane, who is your main villain for the film. But the plot is basically following in his father's footsteps. So Liam Neeson's character is he's trying to be like his dad, but he's struggling a little bit. And he's trying to solve a murder case, which, if he doesn't solve it, it could result in Police Squad being shut down. All the while, you've got old Richard Kane, who is planning on destroying the world in the background, which all culminates in a big boxing fight where he's planning on using these 2 disco balls, balls to basically activate what he calls his plot device, which it causes all the human race to go mad and start injuring and hurting each other. Basically, he wants to wipe out the original population, replace it with his elite, so that the world will be a better place in his eyes. And look, it is a pretty good movie. They do replicate a lot of what the original trilogy do. I didn't mention, but in the original trilogy, they always start with Frank driving around in a police car, but they only show the police light at the top of the car, and it goes to a lot of weird locations. It might be on a hockey pitch, or it might be on a sidewalk, or might even be coming out of a hospital. Lots of different weird things. And they do replicate that at the end of the movie. They do an homage to it and show original footage. And also Frank does a lot of talking in the car himself in the original trilogy, and Liam Neeson's character also does the same thing. But yeah, the style of comedy is similar to the original ones, so you got to look again at the background, but it's not as in your face look at the background. They do point things out a lot better. I will say Liam Neeson's character of Frank Drebin Jr. is pretty good. I haven't watched Liam Neeson in an awful lot lately. I don't, and he seems to play similar characters. So it was nice to a degree to get him to see him play a bit more of a comedic character, because he plays quite serious characters. If you've ever watched stuff like Taken, you know what I mean. But yeah, so it's nice to see him almost lighten up and play a bit more of a comedic character, which he is also in A Million Ways to Die in the West, which I mentioned earlier in this video. But yeah, it is. He is really, really good. But you only focus on mainly him and his partner this time around, which isn't Norberg. They do have someone who plays Norberg Jr., but they're only in one scene. Because at the start of the movie, there's a bank that's being robbed, and Frank goes in disguised as a little girl, takes off his disguise, and then he's him still dressed in a little girl's school outfit, and basically beats the living crap out of everyone in hilarious ways, taking a bite out of one of them's gun, throws a lollipop in their mouth, does all this punching fight. It's really, really weird. But it is the style of comedy of The Naked Gun. But they're all, at the end, they go back to the police headquarters, and they're all sat in a row. All the sons and daughters of the original cast are sat there basically saying hi dad, oh, I miss you, that sort of thing. And they do go down the line. They start with Liam Neeson's character, who says that to Leslie Nielsen's character. And then you've got, obviously, Paul Hauser's character, who does that to George Kennedy's character. But then they do show O.J. Simpson as Norberg on the wall, and his son, goes to say it, but then stops himself. He just says, hi, Dad, and then looks at the camera and then just shakes his head going, So it is, it's almost like that. If you know, you know. But it is nice to pay tribute to the original cast, and I do appreciate that. And that's obviously how you get the connection between the original trilogy and the new trilogy as well. I would say Pamela Anderson's character as the new love interest was interesting, although there was times where I did forget that she was there. There is one really bizarre scene which, we're halfway through the film, they decide to go on a little weekend retreat it to this snowy landscape, and they stay in this wooden cabin, and they start like, you know, proper like love montage, you know, but they find this enchanted book and bring a snowman to life, and the snowman wants to get in on the action with them, but then they refuse to let him, and so he then has a vendetta against them and tries to kill them. It really breaks up the pace of the movie. I don't really know why they included that, but it is what it is. They've got your typical silhouette style of comedy as well, where someone's watching from a distance and you can see like their silhouettes in a curtain. It looks like they're doing something naughty, but they're actually not. Like there's a scene where Pamela Anderson's character, Liam Neeson's character, she's come over for dinner and they're about to cook a turkey in the oven, and she's cleaning the oven, doing all that, and then it looks like she's basically jerking him off in while one of the main villains is like spying on them across the way, and it's like, yeah, you get that happens a lot. That happens a lot in these older comedies, and I'm glad they did implement some bits like that. You know, there's a lot of really random stuff in this movie. The pacing was pretty good. Like I said, the only thing that did disrupt the pacing for me was that scene with the snowman. I don't really know why it was included. The main villain of Richard Kane, yeah, he was pretty good. I did like his final fight with Liam Neeson's character with Frank Drebin Jr., where they tried to have a fist fight. Frank punches him in the stomach once, and instantly he's like, "Oh, you hit the soft spot of my belly, ow!" And he's like, "Do you want to keep fighting?" And he's like, "No, of course I don't want to keep fighting." You know, it is that on the nose style comedy. Again, Marmite comedy. If I'm being perfectly honest, you'll either love it or hate it. I did like at the end of the credits, they did play the original music as well from the original Naked Gun films as well. That was good, because I was waiting for them to play that at the start, but they didn't. But they played it right at the end, and I was like, oh, that's a nice touch. They also do a breaking the fourth wall thing where the credits are playing, the cast are all frozen on the screen, like what would happen back in like the 80s and 90s style comedy films. But Frank and Beth are still moving, and they're like, what's happening, Frank? I'm scared. And he's like, I don't know, we'll solve it, darling. And he like punches the screen at the end because he notices that us, the audience, are watching. I like it when they break the fourth wall like that. It's quite funny. And you can only get away with it in certain style of comedies, and The Naked Gun is that style of comedy. Yeah, and I do like the film. I do like the film. What would I rate it out of 10? I'd probably rate The Naked Gun 2025 probably a 7 out of 10. It was pretty good. Wasn't like the best film I've ever seen. Was funny enough to keep me entertained from start to finish. I did have a fair few laughs. I would recommend going to watch it, but obviously be aware that it's a particular style of comedy. Like I said, slapstick for the most part, but they do change it a little bit. I'd like to say that this is now, like, whereas before I would describe them as like the original idea of what Johnny English would become. This one is definitely following on like Johnny English style of comedy, with elements of the original style of comedy thrown in there as well, because obviously it's got to meet a more modern audience. But that is going to be my review on the new Naked Gun movie and the Naked Gun franchise as a whole. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like it by giving it a thumbs up and comment down below. Have you seen the new Naked Gun movie? Have you seen any of the Naked Gun movies? And what do you think of the franchise as a whole? And subscribe if you are new. But this is the Nerdy Grail signing off for now. I hope you've had an amazing day, and I will see you all next time. Bye for now, everyone.